Hello, everybody. Anthony Romeo here again, WiseUp, episode 2.7. Today, we have a special guest. Like every episode, I say this again, we have a special guest, Bob Voss from Panduit. Now, many of you, this might be your first show listening to WiseUp, and I thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to us. And what is it we've been doing? Well, we've been educating customers out there or potential customers on quality brands and quality services that exist out there. And due to the current circumstances that the entire world is in, this is the safest way that we could provide the readily available material and education on the products and services that are out there to support the IoT, 5G, office solutions, data center solutions. And Bob Voss, coming to us from Indiana, we welcome you, sir. And you've been at it a long time, so we thank you for taking the time. 27 years with Panduit, I might add. So thank you, with the research and development that you have going on with your team and everything that's going on with Panduit. Us at Wise Components, we really truly appreciate being a partnership with Panduit. So Bob, welcome to WiseUp.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for your support of Panduit. That's great. One of these days I'll retire, and you're going to make that possible.
We'll try. So, Bob, talk to us. What gets you excited working for such a great company like Panduit? What drives you? What gets you out of bed other than a paycheck?
The cool thing about Panduit is the focus on important technologies, and it's not just a time to make the donuts kind of a mentality. It's hey, what's the best thing we could do? What's new, different, and exciting? And even with my role, which is a lot to do with standards and engineering standards, global engineering standards, it's how can we contribute? How can we propel the industry forward with some of the technologists and some of the intelligence that's available in our company? So that's what gets me out of bed. It's not just a paycheck. It's wow, you get to work on cool stuff with cool people every day, and it's the culture is infectious. It really is.
So again, we're talking with Bob Voss from Panduit. And now, Bob, are you seeing anything that's changing the industry standards? I mean, I know you're part, or you've chaired in the past, the Ethernet Alliance, I believe, and other groups. So what are you seeing? I mean, you've been at Panduit and you've been other places for, let's just say, longer than 20 years, right? So be kind. With that being said, with everything that's going on around us, the productivity cannot stop. We need to continue to work. Like, I'm working from my home office as you're working from your home office. 80% of the world is working from their home office. What goes behind the scenes and what's helping these things happen, and from Panduit's perspective, if you will?
So the great part about it is, there's a pervasive presence of Ethernet that is in data centers, it's in offices, it comes into our homes. I mean, Ethernet and IP networking is the language of the internet, right? So it's a big productivity increase. It's one of the things that makes you able to do work from home. It enables a lot of cool things. But as we look at the what I'll call OT networks, operational technology networks, if you will, those are automation networks that control the comfort and safety of occupants in a building or a home. They're the networks in a factory or an outside plant that control the profit-making assets of the business. Those are at the top of the network, closer to the cloud, closer to the enterprise network, a great deal of Ethernet. In fact, almost 100% Ethernet. But the edge of the network, where the dirty parts, where the actual work gets done, is not Ethernet today. And what is really exciting is there's an opportunity to do that and make that into an Ethernet, a pervasive presence of Ethernet from cloud to the edge of the network. So that's been my focus since late 2015, and it's single pair Ethernet, and I think that's going to be a pretty cool thing for us.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I know on a previous episode of WiseUp, we had hosted Peter Jones from Cisco Networks, and he's a distinguished engineer, and he was telling us about several different things that are changing in the environment, as you pointed out, but also standard M-based platforms. He brought up on the last episode we did with him about the Sinclair Hotel down in Fort Worth, Texas, and it's basically all run on network switch. So it's all low voltage cable. Everything is, no electrical panels. So, don't let the unions hear that. Oh, no.
Yeah, the guys that bend conduit and pull wire don't want to hear that.
No, absolutely not. Guys that sell the twisted pair cable do, though. But there's a reason other than profitability to my pocketbook. There's a reason behind that is the efficiencies that allow you to see, drill into the lighting control system, the HVAC system, how efficient deliverables of logistics, knowing when the ink cartridges are out or when the water cooler needs to be refilled, and now we see with COVID is that as you pointed out, the occupancy sensors that are going on about the building. So, a lot of people talk about this thing like it's the great and wonderful Oz, the Wizard of Oz, and it all works. It's all magic, but really what it is, it's above the ceilings and behind the walls, and it's dealing with folks like yourself that are manufacturing, but also doing the Q&A prior to putting it to the assembly line. So, walk us through the process. And you mentioned the single pair Ethernet. Where has it been? Where is it today? And where do you see it going?
Okay, awesome. So today at the edge of the network, there's a lot of legacy protocols. They're built for purpose. They were designed to be effective and very deterministic. It's kind of the you had one job to do, and that's kind of the design mantra with that sort of thing. But the problem with doing that, in spite of the fact that stuff is very effective at its job because it had one job to do,
right.
It's like me. It's old, slow, and crabby. And there's a bunch of different protocols that you have to manage. So one of the things that made us put, as a standards community, made us put the crosshairs on the edge of the network is just that. Because the folks that support those legacy networks have acquired a lot of hard-won knowledge. I mean, sure, they went to college and maybe they served in the military and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of what's rattling around inside the graying heads that you see is something that's hard-fought knowledge to support that. So as those folks get old enough to get a worthy retirement that they've worked hard and deserve, that knowledge walks out the door. And that creates a potential business continuity risk for companies. And it's like, wow, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to say, hey, what would it cost to have you work till you drop? Or, can you stay another 5 years? That's really not a good solution, and it's not a scalable solution. So focusing on a way to provide Ethernet right to the edge of the network without really modifying the way companies build things is really the focus of single pair. And it's been a cool trip. We've learned a lot. We've done a lot of the Q&A. There's been a lot of industry input, a lot of contribution. But I think we finally have something now that published in February of 2020 that is just awesome. And it's going to revolutionize it.
Now that's the cable side of it. Now, is the connectors and the connectivity associated with it going to be a standard jack, or is it going to be revolutionized at that too?
It'll be more or less a standardized jack. There'll be, if you will, an RJ45 for single pair Ethernet. And I think that's an important step, because one of the cool things about an RJ45 is, that when you got that in your hand, well, that's an Ethernet jack. That's got Ethernet in it. And maybe if you're a little bit more sophisticated, you go, I could probably do PoE over this wire too, which enables things like the Sinclair Hotel you mentioned. Right. So single pair Ethernet will have that. The cool part about the physical infrastructure, since you mentioned cable, is that the physical infrastructure required for single pair is very similar to the type of cable that's used in factories and buildings today to do the legacy protocols. So not only does single pair support the same sort of topology, but it can even use media that's very similar, or in cases of very healthy cable, you could reuse some of the cable, which really lowers the barrier to entry for people that want to adopt it. So.
Okay. So now when you say reutilize the cable. It's a dirty word in my business. You don't want to reuse the cable. But if you had to reuse the cable, what's the certification in doing so? Because I know that if one man's garbage is another man's treasure, right? There's the expression.
Right.
So not knowing the quality of the craftsman that installed the first project, not knowing that they did all the right parameters into installing from closet A to closet B, did they ensure the distant limitations, the channel, the testing results of the previous install? So who stands behind you reutilizing that cable? Is that going to be Panduit on the certification? Because I know sometimes warranties become of such of an issue,
Right.
Not with Panduit, I'm just saying in general speaking terms. So through that process, what would that process be if you were to reutilize the cable?
So we've prevailed upon people that are expert in the commissioning testing and validation testing, names folks like Fluke Networks, Cyber Data, guys like that. And so to provide an instrument that says, I have the math model for single pair Ethernet on board that I took from the IEEE standard, and I'm measuring the cable, and the measured value of this installed cable will meet those parameters. And if you could do that, and you got an idea when the cable got put in, good. But you're not betting your job on running into the plant manager's office saying, I'm turning all that device net wiring into single pair cable, you watch. And then it goes south, and then that, of course, has career limiting consequences.
Right.
So there is testing protocol. TIA is working on a standard right now for field test instruments just for single pair Ethernet. So that should be fully baked in 2021.
Okay.
So there will be support for it, and some of it's going to be common sense. If it's 25-year-old data highway 2 cable, leave it alone. And finally, what I tell people when they ask me about single pair Ethernet and cable reuse is all cable has a use, and it's to pull the new cable. You can always use it for pull cable when you're pulling the old stuff out and pulling the new stuff in.
That's
so
correct.
It's an interesting thing. It could work out that way, and in some applications like an oil and gas application or something like that, the ability of not having to spend man weeks ripping out old cable in a pinch, you're cool. But nobody's going to do it without testing it. And the test instrument, Fluke's already got stuff you can do on their DSX platform that'll tell you it's healthy and you're good to go.
Right. So I know that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach when we talk to manufacturers. A lot of times when they're bringing something new to the table, it has everybody in mind. When I say everybody, every vertical in mind. But is there a specific vertical that the SPE that you honed in on, or I should say Panduit is honed in on, to say that this will fit that round peg into that round hole really nicely, and it's not going to be too hard to deploy? So is there a vertical? Let's say, is it the financial? Is it the education? Is it hospitality? Or do you think it's everybody? And I'm completely off base by saying it's not one particular vertical.
It's remarkable because when I first got involved, Panduit involved me in it because of my industrial automation experience. And full disclosure, I do industrial automation and I do building automation. But we thought this is going to be really big for industrial networks, and that's a big growing part of Panduit's business. And then as we got to look at it more, we said, oh my God, this is really important for building automation as well, because the legacy protocols are very similar. They have different names, but building protocols are RS-485 based electrically, and so are industrial protocols in a lot of cases. So we said, wow, this is bigger than we thought. This is going to impact the control of temperature, HVAC, lighting in buildings, and it's also going to do the industrial part. Another group, and of course this is something that Panduit's not going to go after, but another industry that benefits from it is automotive, because the ability to have Ethernet superimposed on the power infrastructure in an automobile enables self-driving vehicles and stuff like that. Because today, they have 4 to 6 different networks running on the infrastructure in the car, and they don't speak to each other. So
Right.
if you're going to have a self-driving vehicle and it's supposed to sense that there's a lady on a walker trying to get across the crosswalk and not run her over, you don't want a bunch of protocol translation. You want it all to be Ethernet and go, oh, brakes, beep, you don't run her over.
No, absolutely. No, and I bring up that point because I was assuming that I wasn't thinking about the industrial networks or the automation aspects of it. When I was reading what Cisco had provided me and what you had on Panduit's website, I was looking at this from a BMS standpoint and the efficiencies, and knowing firsthand that in the geography that I live in within the Northeast, I know there's programs going on to all the building owners and those who owners reps are managing buildings, this law called Local Law 97. And it's to reduce the emissions by 40% of the building by 2030. Otherwise, they're going to be heavily fined. So, and I know in the city of New York, they've spoken about Hudson Yards, which is a massive construction site of consisting of multiple buildings, and some of them are not even erect yet. And yet, based upon the building standards today, they're not going to be meeting the building emission standards of tomorrow. So they're already set up for failure. Come this new law, it has just been set in place in November of last year. So, but as we all know that are in engineering, manufacturing, or consulting, design engineering firm, these projects were designed 6-7 years ago. This wasn't designed 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago even. It was designed with good intentions to the efficiencies of that time period, but then you just go and slap this new thing. So when I was looking at SPE and the applications piece of it, I didn't want to put the cart before the horse, and I'd rather have you, confirm that the honest truth that's where it's going, and that's the need. I mean, you have from lighting platforms, as you mentioned, or HVAC, all these different efficiencies that, allowing it to run a little bit smoother. The fact that you bring up automotive and the industrial manufacturing side is, mind-blowing to me, but it does make sense with the investments that many car manufacturers are putting behind autonomous vehicles. My car is not, that crazy technology, but it can drive, within the lanes and keep the distance amongst cars in front of me, and it knows if anything comes jumping, if that lady comes with a walker and throws it at the car, it'll stop. So we hope, and but all these things have to be taken into consideration because the technology on the active components are definitely there, but as you say, they have to marry together so that there isn't liabilities and possibly death, because that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
So,
and, it's an enabler because if you think about 4-pair Ethernet with PoE and single-pair Ethernet will do its own version of network power, which will be called Poodle, which is power over data line.
Say that again, Poodle?
Poodle, P-O-D-L.
Oh, Poodle.
Poodle, IEEE geeks, but that it will provide power and auto negotiate like PoE does and that kind of thing. So the ability to deliver both data and power on just 2 wires is really what's cool about single pair Ethernet. And that's going to be a big enabler. When you think about so many of the things that are at the end of a network cable today, your laptop, things like that, they're natively DC. Solid state lighting, LED lighting, it's natively DC. Right. So how are we getting at that business today? Well, we put a power brick in the wall and it does some inefficient conversion between 120 volts AC to whatever your laptop eats, and off you go, right?
Right.
But natively, the laptop's DC. So the ability to drive DC power in conspicuous amounts down the cabled infrastructure is really big. So we didn't leave that out of SPE's game plan. That has the capability of doing it. And there'll be some pretty significant power, as much as an amp and a half at 55 volts. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah. So Tesla was right and Edison was wrong, basically.
Yeah, and nobody electrocuted an elephant to prove it this time. So,
Right. No, definitely. In other news in Panduit, I just saw something, and I don't even know if this is part of your team, but their 6A cable just came out as the smallest form fit OD of 0.230. And that's huge. As small as it is, it's huge.
yeah.
You know.
Well, and if you think about the density of cabling in data centers and that sort of thing, and think about the traffic that's screaming through data centers as we're all working from home, there's a big consideration for that small cable because it was the original design 6A cable with the separator in it, and the thick jacket and all that kind of stuff. That was the size of your pinky finger. You get a bunch of those in a cabinet, pretty soon there's no room for the air to flow. Now you got that Cisco switch or the UCS server screaming bloody murder, it's about to catch fire. So right. Just the ability to make all those high efficiency, high speed copper connections and let the air blow through there and keep all the active gear healthy and cool, it's huge.
It's a domino effect, right?
Yeah.
You knock down that little tiny pebble, it creates a boulder effect of, and then next thing you know, it's an avalanche of problems. So,
and one of the consequences, not a consequence, but one of the benefits of making a smaller diameter cable like that is the cable's more thermally efficient. So now when you're running PoE through that type of cable, it's actually better at getting rid of the heat. And so the cable stays healthier. So pretty neat stuff.
Yeah, no, you guys are definitely outdoing yourself these days as far as what's out there in the marketplace. You're definitely seeing that you're doing your homework and you have a game plan, especially, not only the future products that are out there, but there's a need. What's the guy's name? Jordan Belfort is like from Wolf of Wall Street, sell me the pen. And it's about, the need, the supply and demand. You're not creating products that are just have a fancy name to it. You're creating something that fills that gap to ensure the productivity or building efficiencies or technology that are driving vehicles, in the automotive field, or the efficiencies of a manufacturer. These are all key things that you're helping save time, money by doing this, and this homework prior to in your group, in your division specifically. So I thank you, sir.
We're glad to help.
Yeah. So again, we're talking with Bob Voss from Panduit. Bob was kind enough to lend his knowledge, what he's taken from the Panduit house for the last, again, 2 decades. I'm not going to say 2 decades. And before that, it was, horse and buggy if you needed your message, but whatever. We're on WiseUp podcast today. We could be streamed on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Anchor. You could check us out on the Wise Components page or Wise Components YouTube channel. Panduit. Bob, again, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity to speak to you about what's going on. For those listening, and again, as we point out, if this is your first episode of WiseUp, or this is your 18th episode of WiseUp, we can't thank you enough. Keep with the comments. We love it. We're 5 stars on Apple iTunes, so we appreciate it, what we're doing here, and we're building a following. So thanks for the thousands of listeners. We greatly appreciate it. Bob, for those who are listening that are interested to learn more about SPE and what you're doing with Panduit, or just Panduit in general, as far as upcoming trainings and events, virtual, of course, I would think, where could that be found?
So I think probably the richest source of content right now is the Ethernet Alliance. Full disclosure, I chair the single pair Ethernet engineering subcommittee for the Ethernet Alliance, and we have generated a big launch on OT networks to educate people about what SPE can do. OT networks, again, being industrial automation and building automation type networks. So ethernetalliance.org would be one place you could look. Panduit's got a landing page on its website, panduit.com, for single pair. There's some great information available there. upcoming events, the next big event will be a webinar at Automation Fair, which is a big industrial automation show. As you said, it'll be virtual, but there's a great presentation on single pair Ethernet that will be myself, my colleague Peter Jones, who you had on our previous broadcast, and Theo Brillhart from Fluke Networks. The three of us are going to get together and talk about single pair Ethernet. That'll be broadcast live in mid-November as part of the Automation Fair, and then it'll be available on demand. There are on-demand webinars available from Ethernet Alliance too, by the way. So if you do go look at theirs, there's not just written content, but there are webinars that you can check out.
Yeah, no, Peter gave me a mouthful. That's why, we're having a conversation. It was great to understand, not only what we're doing today, but what we've done over the last 45 years at Wise Components. We've seen the evolution of the passive and active components come together to, again, help save people time and or money. And what we're doing here at WiseUp is we're trying to educate the customers on these quality brands that are above the ceiling or below our floors or behind the walls, but making it all come together so that you could stay in the comforts of your home working and be productive, or go into a safe, fully automated office, maybe getting there by an autonomous vehicle one day, right? But it all comes back around full circle with the components and the products that quality brands like Panduit are bringing to the table. And you, sir, what you've been doing for the last several years, I commend you. Honestly, I do. Whether I'm a geek or not, I'm not worthy. So I appreciate you again taking this opportunity to speak with me and the folks that are listening in at WiseUp. So greatly appreciate that. I can't thank you enough.
Thanks for the invitation, Anthony. I enjoyed it a lot.
All right, you're welcome. So again, check us out on iTunes, Apple iTunes, Anchor, or Spotify, and be sure to comment and or like, otherwise we'll find you.